Just a day after Washington State University's football season came to a close in a loss in the Holiday Bowl against Syracuse, 52-35, AD and McCoy announced that they have found their man and 37-year-old current head coach for South Dakota State University, Jimmy Rogers. We're going to get into as much information about Jimmy as we currently know. His press conference with WSU is going to be the week of January 6th. But before that, let's get into a bit of the Holiday Bowl recap and some of the highlights from that game. Again, they lost 52-35 against Syracuse. The odds were certainly stacked against Washington State with so many guys in the portal going up against the leading passer in the country. But certainly there were some positives from this Holiday Bowl, starting off with Zevi Eckhouse. This is Zevi's first start in a Cougar uniform, and he looks solid. He went 31 for 43, 363 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions in the air. He also added 11 rushes for 28 yards, averaging 2.5 and 1 rushing touchdown. Dylan, what were some of your takeaways from the Holiday Bowl?
Man, outgunned, outmanned, not outfought. That was my gamer lead, and they came out hot. I mean, Zevi, forced that first 3 and out, or it wasn't a 3 and out. I think Syracuse had a first down on their first play, and then WSU forced a punt. They come down 8 plays, 68 yards. Kyle Williams had a couple big plays in that first drive. He was already over like 66 yards receiving on 2 catches. And then Zevi punctuated it with that 4-yard touchdown run. And it really energized. Like, I think every Coug fan that was there was just like, obviously taking the night with a grain of salt, and people were just happy to be, at a football game with Cougar fans, with their Cougar faithful. Not as many people from the San Diego State game. But I want to say there's probably anywhere from 8,000 to 11,000 Coug fans there. They announced 25,000 total at the stadium. Yeah, I mean, Zevi played his ass off. Kyle Williams as well. He didn't need to play this game. He also went out late where it looked like he could have maybe blown his knee out. That was a very scary situation for a couple minutes. He came back in there. He finished with 10 receptions, I think 172 receiving yards, breaking Des Bryant's Holiday Bowl receiving yard record that was set in 2008 when he was at Oklahoma State. Offense looked great. I thought Nick Edwards called a hell of a game. He did a fantastic job in his one game as offensive coordinator. Football Scoop has announced today that they expect Edwards to go to Wake Forest. The expect is for Collegius to go to Wake Forest too. Collegius for some reason blocked me on Twitter or X. Very, very odd situation. I was told that he was maybe not going to answer any of my questions in the post game. He really didn't say much in the post game. The media was only allowed like 7 or 8 questions. It was pretty surprising. That was soft of him. That's all I'm going to say about it. He didn't like the Buddha Aluka or the question I asked of Fran Brown specifically about, he kept saying throughout the press conference how prestigious WSU was. Well, like that had me thinking near the end of the press conference, well, Fran, like, should they have been left out of the P4? And he didn't really answer the question correctly himself. But going back to the game, they were up 21-14 at one point. I mean, it was a 35
after that block punt for a touchdown.
Yeah, Josh Meredith, the hometown kid, picks it up. Leon Neal Jr., who, appeared in 7 or 8 games, mostly special teams, broke through. And, that was Rick Schloss, the guy that was handling media for the week in San Diego. He announced, to the press box, hey, that was the 4th highest scoring quarter in Holiday Bowl history was the first quarter. So it was an exciting game. For the most part, the Cougs hung in it for 45 to 47 minutes. And, there was a few plays where it's like, okay, do you kick the field goal instead of going for it on 4th and 2? I didn't mind the 4th and 2, go for it there. But Zevi's not John Mateer, all right? Let's not have 4 wide receivers out wide and decide we're going to just go with a QB blast. I mean, that didn't really make sense to me. And then I didn't know that our holder was in the transfer portal too, because that's John Mateer. So We saw a bad hold as well, where shout out Ace Ventura, laces out. Dean's first miss was a laces in, so feel bad for Dean. He missed his last 2 field goals at WSU.
Yeah, and some of the other positives, we already mentioned Zevi a bit. His deep ball accuracy looked pretty solid. I think it was the first drive where he dropped that pass to Kyle Williams that was right in the basket there. If he decides to stay, I know in the post game presser, he also was stating that he doesn't want to get too far ahead and, say what he's going to be doing in his future. We'll see if Zevi decides to stay for his final year in Pullman.
One more thing about Zevi, and just to
Yep.
piggyback off of what you just said, regardless of what his outcome is, I think it was a total win for the Zevi Eckhouse brand on Friday night, because he's got that red shirt. He's, one of our buddies in one of our group chats said, "Oh, he's going to get NIL." It's probably not. It's more of like an opportunity to play somewhere, perhaps. That kid can play in the Mountain West or the Sun Belt, or like a G5 conference. I truly believe it, but we'll see if he's a match with what Jimmy Rogers is trying to do in that coaching staff. So one thing I will say from a source, the players knew on Thursday night or Thursday. So that kind of gives some credence into Jamori Colson returning and then Trey Shackelford returning. Players knew Thursday, according to a source.
Yeah, that's interesting because let's go into the flight tracker stuff. There was a private flight that was heading from Bozeman, Montana to San Diego. There was actually a couple flights we weren't exactly sure, but speculation was that Brent Vegan was flying down to San Diego to interview for that head coaching spot.
Kook fan did say, hey, Vegan did interview for the job. They did report that.
So that means that WSU picked Jimmy Rogers over Vegan. We had been talking about how great of a hire Vegan would have been. WSU thinks that Jimmy Rogers is a better hire. Just a couple other guys that I want to touch on in a Holiday Bowl, and then we'll get into Jimmy. But Leo Pulalasi, he looked like a stud. I didn't realize how big he was. He was standing up right next against Zevi, and he looked taller than Zevi. Leo Pulalasi is 6'1".
Zevi might be smaller than Drew Brees.
Lastly, with the Holiday Bowl, Kyle Thornton. He had an epic speech at the end of the presser, and I'm just going to play that clip right now.
I know it's pretty easy to keep track of the ones who don't want to be a part of the team, but the Cougs who want to be Cougs, they're a little harder to track, but they're in there. Being inside the locker room, there's a lot of guys in there that bleed crimson and gray, and they want to be Cougs for life. And there's something special here in Pullman and in the Cougs, and that's not going anywhere. There's some fighters in here that aren't going to change. They're going to carry on this legacy of fighting. I believe that. I know that. And so, I know it's a little doom and gloom for the Cougs around now, but there's sunny days coming. There's sunny times coming. I do believe that. And the future Cougs are going to go find it. So I believe that.
So Kyle Thornton is a Coug for life. That is the definition of what you want on the Palouse. And with Jimmy Rogers coming into town, it sounds like that he has the same type of mentality. He has been able to keep his entire roster on the staff, even after winning an FCS National Championship in 2023. Everyone that was eligible to returned. There was not one person that left the roster from that 2023 team. So that's something to say about Jimmy Rogers as we transition into that news. So first off, I didn't even know who Jimmy Rogers was, to be honest, until this morning when the news started to come out. Dylan, what was your initial reaction? Had you heard about this guy as a potential?
No, I mean, kind of the circulation was Brett Vegan. And, when I interviewed Joel Klatt last night, that was like one of my questions to him was like, hey, one of the top candidates that's been thrown around is Brent Vegan. What do you think about it? And I had to cut that out of our piece, obviously, because the Jimmy Rogers news moved very quickly. And, I got to shout out South Sound Coug because he was the first one that had it today, not Ross Tellinger. South Sound had it probably about an hour and a half before him. He said, get ready to learn Jimmy Rogers, Coug Nation. Mm-hmm. And, just taking a look at some of the quick stats or accolades with Rogers is, hey, SDSU led FCS in 10 stat categories in 2023, scoring defense 9.3 points per game. That's crazy. Total defense 257 yards per game. team passing efficiency, third down conversion rate. 2023 playoff run outscored their opponents 146-15, including a pair of shutouts. 6 members of the 23 roster were All-Americans. 8 players were drafted or signed to free agent deals in the NFL. I mean, this is South Dakota State, this FCS program. But one thing reiterated in the Coug fan articles was, hey, he is roster retention. You need a guy that's going to be able to recruit and then recruit your current roster in the current NIL landscape. So, yeah, I mean, the accolades are there. 27-3 all time. 2 of those losses to North Dakota State. We saw what they did. They almost beat Colorado at the beginning of the year to start this season out, and a loss to Oklahoma State. So, the guy wins, and it's going to be a total change-up of what we're accustomed to here at Washington State. Are we going to be moving away from the air raid? Is it going to be more of like an Oregon State look to your program? Because offensively speaking, and Connor and I are going to dive into SDSU more over the next week. Apparently the press conference is going to be anywhere from January 6th to January 10th. So we'll have another podcast where we kind of really dive into Rogers more and what he's going to do. And apparently he's going to bring most of his staff from South Dakota State. Another source said to me, Christian Smith, who's currently the D line coach at Northwestern University, was on the staff in 2023 at SDSU, could be the defensive coordinator, like one of the top candidates for the defensive coordinator position. And I sent you this, and we'll have, this graphic right here, explains he's one of the 35 coaches, top 35 coaches under 35 years old from the 2025 American Football Coaches Association. So this is a guy that's kind of climbing up the ladder here. And you're just kind of looking connection wise of, who's going to be a legitimate candidate for that OC and DC job going forward. So that's a name to keep your eyes out for, is Christian Smith.
A little bit more background on Jimmy Rogers. He actually played high school football in the Phoenix, Arizona area. He then went up to South Dakota State University to play his college football. He was a standout defensive linebacker at South Dakota State from 2006 through 2009. He was a 2-time all-conference player. He also led the team in the conference with 110 tackles in 2007. He again led the team in tackles in 2008 with 93. He was also the captain of the Jackrabbits in their first FCS playoff team in 2009. After he graduated from South Dakota State, he then became a graduate assistant, starting at SDSU to start his coaching career. He then jumped to another university, but since then he's been back for the last 12 years at South Dakota State. So 18 of the last 20 years, he has been at South Dakota State. He's a loyal guy. He's stayed true to his university until this opportunity came up. And part of what I've seen so far is that he definitely is a defensive mind. He is a defense first coach. So we're going to see what type of offense that they incorporate. South Dakota State, they do have more of a hybrid pro style offense, it sounds like.
RPO heavy as well. I mean, yeah, you're gonna be seeing Washington State trying to, win time of possession. You're getting yourself in short third down, spots. So, the other aspect too is, before WSU hired Jeff Schmedding, Jimmy Rogers was Jake Dickert's top pick to be the DC, and he ended up taking the head coaching job at SDSU.
And then Jimmy Rogers, after South Dakota State University won the national championship in 2022, their head coach stepped down and retired. Jimmy Rogers stepped in, and he led SDSU to their second consecutive FCS National Title and finished 2023 15-0. He then carried a 29-game win streak into his second year. And after that 2023 season, he was actually named the top FCS coach in all of FCS division football. And then in 2024, they made it into the semifinals of the FCS playoffs this season. The Jackrabbit defense led all of FCS schools in scoring defense with 12.4 points per game allowed, 4th in total defense with 272.9 yards per game allowed, 6th in rushing defense with just 90.5 yards per game. And offensively, SDSU ranked 1st in sacks allowed, just 0.5 sacks allowed, tackles for loss allowed with just 2.58, and they were ranked third in running offense with 243.2 yards per game on the ground. They were also seventh in scoring offense with 36.6 points per game and ninth in total offense, 441.9 yards per game. As we know, WCU's defense was atrocious this past year. Having Jimmy Rogers come in with his mentality, he also has coached multiple 100-plus tackle linebackers at SDSU. That should be quite the change next year.
And one other aspect, kind of looking at the rushing stats, I mean, they had 7 players with 25 carries or more, 5 players that had 45 carries or more, 1,200 yards, 646 yards, 581 yards, 464 yards, 380 yards. So, you have 6 guys that are over 380 yards rushing on the year. One aspect, too, is a big-time receiver is Griffin Wild. I'm not sure on the enunciation of his last name, but he entered the portal about 30 minutes before the Jimmy Rogers smoke started heating up, and it had a no contact tag on it. So you better hope he's got his luggage headed to Pullman, because this kid had 12 touchdowns last season, 71 receptions for over 1,100 yards. That's a big-time wide receiver transfer to come in and have a number 1 guy going into next season with Kyle Williams and Chris Hudson gone.
A couple other potential transfers from SDSU to look out for are their number 2 running back in Angel Johnson. Also 2 defensive tackles, both their sack leader in Kobe Claiborne, as well as defensive tackle Bryce Hawthorne. And from what has been released so far, Jimmy Rogers' contract is a 5-year deal in the $8 to $9 million range. He goes from making $310,000 at SDSU. He takes a pay bump up to about $1.7 million at WSU. That is massive for him and his family. And WSU Hall of Famer Paul Sorensen chimed in on his thoughts. Again, this is from CougFan.com. Make sure to check it out there. He states that this is a great hire, and I mean great. He is an outstanding coach and has a ton of respect as a recruiter, both at the high school level and in the portal.
Well, and the guy that's, from Arizona. We need a head coach and a staff that's going to, plug into the state of California, state of Arizona. You still want to recruit your own state, but we'll see what he can do with the current recruits. We haven't heard anything on Steele Pizzella still. That's still up in the air. So obviously, hey, if the players know, hopefully the recruits know as well on Thursday meeting. But I guess that's the next bridge we're crossing, is retention and what he's going to bring with him.
That's about all we know for now. Really, our condolences to all of you SDSU fans. We know exactly how this feels. I mean, it's just an awful feeling. This is a product of current day college football. The top dogs, take from all of this, the smaller schools. That happened to us, and then it just goes down the ranks, and this is just a ripple effect. So sorry to you guys, but if you are an SDSU fan, make sure to let us know in the comments below your thoughts on Jimmy Rogers and his coaching style. If you're a Coug fan, let us know your thoughts in the comments below on this hire. And make sure to like and subscribe to the Couch GM to stay up to date on all things WSU football. And we'll see you in the next one.